Kids are great. So for everybody in the room, I can tell you something about yourself, even if I've never met you. If I didn't know anything about your background, where you came from, I can tell you something that will be accurate about you, and I want to tell you that today. And it can be anybody in the room. If you're a guest today and I've never met you, I know this about you before I even meet you, learn your name or anything. It relates to men and women. It relates to old and young. It doesn't matter about your background, your education, your income, your interests. This is true of everybody. And it's even true of a man I met last night. His name is Mehmet. I met him because I took a flight out of Grand Prairie. I was helping a church up in Peace River, and I flew out of Grand Prairie last night to Edmonton, and when I got there, I got an Uber, and I met the driver named Mehmet. And I like taking Uber because you get to meet interesting people. And so Mehmet let me know that he was from Turkey, had moved in 28 years ago, lived in a city of 300,000 on the Mediterranean Sea. He told me how during the winter the temperature never gets below the mid-20s, and in the summer it gets up to the 40. And I said to Mehmet, "You came to Edmonton?" It's like a little colder. We have people from Edmonton that want to go to the Mediterranean in the wintertime, and you moved here. So it's great meeting with Mehmet, but you know, the same thing of you is true of him. So here's what I know about you. And here's what I think you already know about you. You just may not know that you know it about you and about the people who are around you. So here's the truth. That every person in this room is asking the question, can I get in? Will I fit in? And if I like it being in, can I stay in? That we all have a longing to belong. That all of us want to belong, whether it's in a school or a team or a church or even a family. We all want to know, can I get in? Will I fit in? And if I like it, can I stay in? And so all of our guests may be asking that question today. You're in already, but you want to know, can I fit in? Is there a place for me here at Bethel? And if I like it, can I stay in? We all feel those questions because there's something inside of us that's intrinsic to that. The idea of our lives and who we are and what we're all about. You see, we all have a long to belong. That fits in every one of us. And that's because you were made for relationships. When you were created, when God created, and you go right back to the beginning, God created you for relationships, to be connected to other people, to not be alone. And, you know, you've heard the term, perhaps, the idea of significant other. You understand that term. Let me suggest to you today that what you understand about significant other, when you introduce somebody and you go, yeah, that's my significant other, that in our world and in our life, there are no insignificant others. That all of us have somebody in our lives. And in fact, if I take you back, I think, I can do this myself, like with my own life. If I take you back to your highs and your lows, your good times, your sad times, the things that you celebrated, the things that you were excited about, your accomplishments, your achievements, your successes, or even your failures or defeats, I guarantee you that there's a name that you will associate with those moments. That you'll remember, if you're on a team and your team won, you remember who the quarterback was or who the guy who scored the winning goal was. If you love baseball, everybody remembers the name Bill Buckner. Because, how many know the name Bill Buckner? All right, so yeah, you know the story behind Bill Buckner. There will be in your life a who for everything you achieved, everything you accomplished. There's always somebody in there. And here's one of the keys, too, that all of us are called for a purpose. That when you were born, just like Liesl, God gave you a purpose. The ability to find that in life is what life is all about, to discover that purpose. But when you live out your purpose and your mission, you can't do that alone. That you are not enough for your own mission. You need somebody else to help you. That's what relationships come in. And so whether it's in a family, a friendship, a business, a corporation, a church, a school, we have principals, but we have vice principals. Why? Because the principal needs a vice principal. We have partners. We don't go through life alone. There's something inside of you that's built for relationships. God put that inside of you. There's an intrinsic aspect of your life that is focused on that. And when we understand that, a whole bunch of stuff opens us in life. There's a book called The Power of the Other. And the whole idea is how from the bedroom to the boardroom, other people influence your life. And at the highs and lows, the change points, the setbacks and the comebacks, there will always be a name. There'll always be a name. There's a lot of books that are written on relationships, and if you can see the titles, and maybe you own some of these books, you'll see they're about marriage, about dating, about friendships, about connections, and you can go to any bookstore, any library, and find hundreds, thousands of titles that relate to relationships, because people want to know, how can I get good at relationships? How can I get good at connecting? And then you find a book like this one, Have a New Husband by Friday. I don't know if any of the spouses out there have that book in your library, but that's a fascinating process, A New Husband by Friday. And people want quick fixes sometimes in their relationships. And then you can even go online and buy The Perfect Family, mom and dad and 2 kids, right? You can buy those. People actually purchase those and bring them into their lives. Everything is focused on relationships in our world. Everything is about the other in our lives. And it goes right back to the initial book of the Bible, Genesis, in the 2nd chapter, where the Creator says, it is not good for man or woman to be alone. It's not good for us to be alone. That we were created not to be alone. We were created for connection. That we were created for relationships. And in one of the oldest wisdom books in the world, you'll find it in your Bible. It's called the book of Ecclesiastes. I'd like you to read out the yellow word when I get to it, if you would, please. So the first word is your word, and that word is people are. Can you say that word again? One more time. I say that for emphasis because 2 are better than 1, because they get more done by working. If one falls down, the other can help him up. But it's bad for the person who is alone and falls, because is there to help. We are connected to other people. There's a relational aspect of our lives where we need each other, and this is a wisdom application to our lives. It's lived out in everyone's life. Gary Smalley says that life is relationships. The rest is just details. He's written a book called The DNA of Relationships, about how we need others in our lives, and how we can actually have others in our lives, and how we can be happy to have others in our lives. So I believe that relationships are a mess worth making. Because if you're sitting there and you're listening to me talk about relationships and other people, you recognize that there is no perfect family. This is Sunday morning. You had to get up. If you have kids, you had to help them get dressed. You had to get them in the car. You had to feed them, maybe in the car. You had to get them to church. You understand that coming to church on a Sunday is complex and not always perfect. And sometimes you end up at church where you need to ask forgiveness as soon as you get out of the car, because some of the things you've said or thought or wish you could have not said in the car. And our lives are imperfect in families. This works everywhere. Corporations, businesses. If you're in a partnership, if there's 2 people in your business and you got a partner, you're going to discover that that can become a mess, because sometimes you disagree and sometimes one lets the other down. If you're in a family, you feel that. If you're in a church, you feel that. If you're in a school, wherever you are, life is messy. Relationships are messy, but relationships are a mess worth making. The ability to stay together. Even Jesus understood that. See, because he understood that you can't fulfill your purpose in life by yourself. This was true of Jesus. What's the very first thing that Jesus does? I love following his example. When he wants to begin something significant, the very first thing he does is, and we find this in the Gospel of Mark, that Jesus appointed 12 people that they might, can you read those words out? You see, this is what Jesus wants for not only the 12 people in the Bible, Matthew and Mark and Luke and John and Judas, but he also wants it for you. So let me say that again. Jesus appointed 12. He appointed you that they might. Jesus wants to be with you. He wants to build a relationship with you. That's the beauty of it. And at the end of this message, I want to give you steps on how you can start that relationship with Jesus, and how you can enter into a relationship that is with God. And as we walk through this, there's a couple of principles that I want to share with you that come from the life and the model of Jesus. So let me ask you a question. When you think about Jesus and you think about his not only 12 disciples, but others who followed him, when you think about your life, if you're a follower of Jesus today, what did Jesus require to make relationships healthy? If what you might know of the Bible, what you understand about God, what he values, what do you think is one word that Jesus would require in relationships that would help deal with messes, that would help deal with challenges. And so I'm hearing people say the word love. And I think that is the one that everybody turns to, but there is a different word. And it's actually a word that trumps everything else. It's higher. Actually, everything originates out of this. And this is where following Jesus differentiates from following anybody else. So the idea that the word that Jesus would use is obedience. Obedience. He says, if you love me, then obey me. Keep my commandments. So the idea of obeying Jesus, of keeping his commandments, the ability to love is expressed by obedience. So obedience actually comes before love. And let me suggest this to you. If you obey everything that Jesus asks us to do, the outcome will be love. If you choose love but not obedience, sometimes the outcome becomes selfishness. But when you choose to obey Jesus and you say, I'm living my life so I can follow Jesus and I want to obey him, I want to know what he says and then I want to do it, I guarantee you that if you do everything that Jesus commands you, that you will love, that people will feel your love, that your life will be better, your family will be better. Whatever mess you might be in, whatever relational mess you might be in, can be addressed and made healthy and bettered because of what Jesus invites us to do. So whether that's you, mom or dad, or you, husband or wife, or you as a boss, or you as an employee, or you as a friend, to follow Jesus is the wisest way to live, because when we follow Jesus and we obey Jesus, the outcome in everything is love. And when we end up not being loving, I guarantee you that you'll trace it back to the fact that you're not doing what Jesus would ask you to do. It's that simple. That's the beauty of Christianity. It's not like memorizing the whole Bible. It's not like knowing all the theology about God. It's simply understanding the fact, okay, I'm going to choose to follow Jesus. I'm going to find out what he wants me to do, and then I'm going to do it. And when I do it, I'm going to be a person who's known for love. I'm going to be a person who's known by other people that I want that person in my life because they love me. They care about me. And when you seek to love without obeying Jesus, that's where relationships really get messy and they break down. But if you seek to obey Jesus, you are going to have as an outcome love. I say that because healthy relationships require more than love. The Beatles were wrong. Love is not all you need. In a relationship, you need mutual respect. You need compromise. You need sacrifice. You need understanding. You need the willingness to work at your relationship. And I think all of those things are an outcome of obeying Jesus. That when you have in your heart the desire that I want to obey you, Jesus, and follow you. As you go through the New Testament, there are 59 different references in the few chapters of the New Testament that have the term one another in it. And I wanted to just walk you through a couple of those to outline what I'm saying. You see, all of these are about obeying Jesus. The church is about a group of people who have simply said, I've settled in my life. I want to obey you, Jesus. I want to follow you. And these are the ways we do that. So in this one, the red letters are what I'd like you to read. I'll start off on the white, and when we get to the red, if you would just say that out loud, please. So the first one is serve in love. Carry burdens. One another. Each other. Encourage each other up, one another on toward love and good deeds, each other. Confess your sins. Pray for one another. When your heart is aligned with Jesus, that's what's there. That's what's there. And so the ability to make a decision and say, okay, this might be an aha moment for you. Maybe you've been trying to love like Jesus. And what Pastor Bob is actually suggesting is if you obey Jesus, that's where the love comes in. That when you find out what he wants you to do, that you're doing it because you're obeying him, this is what is wise and good. You're not even questioning it. You're just saying, okay, if Jesus tells me to forgive, then I'm going to figure out who in my life I need to forgive. And I'll do that. And as I do that, love is going to come into my life. And that other person is going to feel that love. And God's going to feel that love as well. So our whole adventure in life is to try to figure out what Jesus wants us to do. We're going to have communion in just a couple of moments. Communion is what Jesus asked us to do. On the night before he was betrayed by his messy relationships, even Jesus experienced this. One of the closest men to him, his name was Judas, the most trusted individual of his disciples. The 12 guys that Jesus called to follow him, the treasurer, Judas, was the one who was the most reliable, the most person with integrity, the person that the other 11 trusted completely. And it was Judas that made famous the term Judas kiss, because the one that Jesus trusted the most didn't obey him and did what he thought was right and betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And so even on the night as Jesus is now being betrayed by one of his closest friends, he tells his disciples to do something in his memory. And that's why we're going to, at the end of this service, have what we call communion. It's simply a reminder of what Jesus did. He took bread and he took wine. He gave them the bread and told them to break it, and this was his body. And he gave them the wine and said, drink it. This was his life, his blood. And this was a new relationship that could be built in God. And as the church began to practice and come together, even something as really significant to Jesus as communion got messed up. It's very easy to get messed up, even in a church, even in a New Testament church. And so in the book of Corinthians, chapter 11, the author of this letter to a group of believers in a city called Corinth had to write to them about a correction. And this is what he said. Here's how their relationships got messed up. The Apostle Paul, who's writing this, says to them, I hear that your meetings do more harm than good. So what he's saying is that when you guys come together for church, actually getting together is worse than not getting together. That your relationships are so messed up that when you come together, actually getting together does more harm than good. And what does he say? He says, well, I hear that when you come together as a church, there are divisions among you. And so I think that's so typical of all life, that when we come together in relationship, the thing that everything in our world ends up trying to force us into is division. That we begin to think about ourselves. And when we think about ourselves, that takes a step back from other people. Sometimes we turn our back on other people. Sometimes we elevate ourselves above other people. I love the Bible because it's containing such sarcastic comments. Like the Bible doesn't pull any punches. And it lets stuff in that I wouldn't let in if I was trying to write a Bible about me and how to work. But notice what is said next by the Apostle Paul in these scriptures. He says to the people in the church, no doubt there has to be differences among you to show which has God's approval. And he's being very sarcastic here. He's saying to them, sure, you guys have differences. I know. You just need to show who's the better Christian than the other. And he's not trying to create a prescriptive direction for people to go, but try to make a little bit of fun of them by saying, you guys, it's all messed up where you are. You need to take a step back and think about, are you obeying Jesus with how you're behaving? Are there people you need to forgive? Are there people that you think you're better than, that you can actually serve? And this is what he's saying in the midst of this, that all our relationships can get messed up. Christian relationships can get messed up. Families can get messed up. If you feel like you're in a relationship that is messed up, it's not just you. It's not just because of you. We're in a world that does that. And the way to get aligned again is to say, okay, I want to just recalibrate. I want to obey Jesus. I want to surrender my life to Jesus, just like the song that Leanne led us in. Jesus, all to you I surrender. And I want to obey you. I want to live for you. I want my marriage to be obedience to you, Jesus. I want my parenting to be obedience to you, Jesus. I want my friendship, my business, everything that I do, all my relationships to simply be in obedience to you. And then Jesus gives us direction on how we can get along in our relationships in the church. Even in the midst of conflict and difficulties, Jesus lays out a pattern for how people can deal with that. You'll find it in Matthew chapter 18. That when things do get messy, when things fall apart, when somebody says something and it hurts somebody else, or they do something and it brings hurt to somebody else, Jesus anticipated that. Even before he was crucified and then buried and raised from the dead, this is what he tells his disciples. He says, if a fellow believer hurts you, what I want you to do is go and tell them. Work it out between the two of you. And if he listens, then you've made a friend. So this is what Jesus, this is his directions. If we're going to obey Jesus, this is the outcome that brings love. So if we have a problem with somebody, the idea that Jesus says is to obey me is then to go to that person and say to them, you know, what you said to me, that really hurt me deeply. So how do we normally act, though? Right? What we normally do is that if I have a problem with Prakash down in the front row here, and so Prakash has said something that hurt me, like he really, now Prakash would never do this. But if he said something that just deeply hurt me and offended me, and I was wounded. So normally what we do is rather than me going to Prakash, I go over here and I come and talk to Jeff. And I said, Jeff, you know what Prakash said to me? Can you believe this? That guy, he's a board member in our church, and he said this to me, and he deeply hurt me, right? So rather than me going over to talk to Prakash, I go and talk to Jeff, right? And then everybody's going to get their head down so they don't let me pick on them right now, right? But I end up going to Landon, and I say the same thing. Hey, Landon, can you believe that Prakash, a board member, you can believe that? Okay, yes. All right, so everybody watching online, sorry, I kind of lost you back there, but I'm back again. We do that, don't we? Like we end up talking to everybody except the person that could solve the problem. And the beauty of Jesus is that when there's offense, when there's hurt in our lives, the ability to simply follow that pattern. And then he also looks at this, because things that are messy don't get unmessy easily. And he says, if that happens, and I go to Prakash and I say, Prakash, you know, you're my friend, and what you said to me really hurt me. If Prakash goes, I don't care. So Jesus anticipates that. And he says, if that person won't listen, then take somebody else with you so that the presence of witnesses will keep things honest. And then try again. So if I go to Prakash and the first time he's just not interested at all, and I go with a friend now, I take Jeff and I say, like, Prakash, I want to have this, I want to continue this friendship. Like, we got to work together. How are we going to work this out? I feel hurt by you. And if Prakash again says, don't want to talk, I go back again a third time and I say, Prakash, the most important thing to me is not what we believe or anything. Our relationship is more important to me than anything else. And I love you, I care about you, and I just want to be a friend with you. And so that appeal, that's what Jesus does for us. You see, and the outcome of that, the other way is gossip, this way is good. It's harder, it's more difficult, but we tend to default to the easy way, the way that ends up in gossip. And then that's where things really get messy. Because everybody who can't fix the problem is now a part of the problem. And if we just went and dealt with the problem, then relationships would be healthy. This is where obedience to Jesus comes in. You see, Matthew 18, I'm going to guess that many of you in this church have heard those verses. You understand them. But do we do them? Do we live them out? And there's so many other things that Jesus calls us to do in obedience, and that sometimes we simply see as an option, or we're not sure we have to do it because maybe we're excluded. And if we simply chose obedience in everything you did, love would be the outcome. Relationships that are messy could get healed. Never be perfect, I know that. But what we would have is health, and you would have it in your family. Where's forgiveness needed in your families, in your friendships, in your church, in your community? To affect those things, to follow through with those things, that's Jesus' heart for us. That's what he really wants for us. So let me suggest this as we close off, because we're going to move to communion here. And what I've shared with you, I want to apply specifically to your life. That to understand the biggest picture of why we act the way we do. And if we're built for relationships, and if we have a longing to belong, why does it get so hard? What does God want for us, and how can God help us? Well, I think, again, if you go back to origins, how all of us originated. So when we were created by God, we were created for friendship. We were created for friendship with God, and we were created for friendship with other people. And the difficulty is that sin came into our world. We chose to go our own way. In the book of Genesis, Adam decides to disobey God. And with that, and sin coming in, conflict gets created. So where there was supposed to be friendship, we now have conflict. And with that conflict, we have mess. And the way to walk forward in that is to understand why Jesus came. That Jesus came so he could help reconcile us with God and us with others. That he could create a reconciliation, that a relationship that's broken and unhealthy, that needs healing, could be mended and made whole. That's why he came. That's why he died. That's why he was buried. That's why he was raised from the dead, so he could give us life. And that's why he calls us to simply follow him, that he invites us to obey him so that we can have a way out of sin and conflict, that we can have a way through sin and conflict. And he saves us for a life of health, and he saves us for a life of relationships. And what Jesus does is invite us into a relationship. He wants to be with us, like I said at the beginning. He invites us to do that by simply saying, come follow me. And what you've heard this morning, you're here and this resonates with you because your life is one that is like everyone else's, that you're finding there's a mess, that you want a way out of it, that there's unresolved conflict, that there's issues, not just with each other, but with God. And that this morning, today, October 27, would be your day to say, I want to resolve that. I want to settle something. That in our lives, we're either doing one of two things. We're either walking our own way or maybe under the influence of somebody else. And what this is a call to is to stop and to turn and to say, okay, I'm going to walk after Jesus. I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm going to let him be the boss of my life. I'm going to find out what he wants me to do, and then I'm going to do it. Today, October 27, I want to surrender my life to Jesus. That's what it is to become a follower. And I want to take a moment and just pray with you right now, because I think there's people in the room that are ready to make that choice. So could I invite you simply to bow your heads with me, please? And just let me lead you in a prayer. This is my words, but as you pray this in your heart, in your mind, you can even do it silently. God will hear this. He's good at that. But if you say this and you mean it, from my words to yours, something will happen in this moment between you and Jesus. He is that close and that real. So, let me just lead you in prayer and you say it in your heart. So Jesus, I'm here this morning at Bethel, or I'm watching online, and what I've heard makes sense to me. I've been doing my own thing, and I'm trying to make things good, but sometimes it makes it feel worse. And I know that there's an unsettledness in my life. And I've heard today that I need to make a decision to say, I want to obey you, Jesus, to follow you. And if I've understood right, that you want me to follow you, and that you want me to be in your life and you in my life. And so, Jesus, I say to you right now, come into my life. Everything I know of me, I give to everything I know of you. And I believe that you're God, that you died for me, that you're alive so that I can have life. And I choose to go your way. Help me to know your way and to obey you and to follow with all my heart. And I thank you, Jesus, for this moment and for helping me come to this moment and for committing to me to lead and guide and support me. So I trust you, Jesus, and I pray this now to you. Amen. Amen. Friends, for all of you who prayed that prayer, that you said yes to asking Jesus in your life, there's next steps after that, and one of those is this time of communion. The opportunity to say, you know what, faith is not about me, about how good I am, how much I know. It's all about Jesus, that he died for me. I believe that. And so this is a wonderful moment for you to participate in something that maybe you've observed or maybe even participated in before, but that this would be a moment where you're saying, I get it. I want to follow Jesus. I want to surrender to him. And not only would I invite you to participate in this, but I would like to hear from you. I'd like to be able to follow up with you. So as I mentioned with the balloon, last Sunday, Pastor John just had people look up, and when he caught their eye, he understood they were making a decision. I'd like, if you would, to do one of two things, to either connect with me after this service, or even if you would take the same number that we looked at before and just text the word follow. So if you're watching online today, or you're here in the house at Bethel, to simply text the word follow to this number. And when I get that text, I'll know you made a decision to follow Jesus. There will be a red balloon on the platform, whether you're watching online or right here at Bethel this week, next Sunday. It's worth celebrating. Friends, this is the biggest thing. I think the wisest thing you can do with your life is to choose to follow Jesus and then obey Jesus, because that always guarantees that you're going to love like Jesus as you obey him. And that's what this table represents. I'm going to have our servers, if they would come, please, to help